The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Greetings, friends. Time for another edition of Need to Know. Kip Keefer with you another week here on TKR and across all of the Apple platforms. Wherever you tune in, we appreciate you being part of our audience. We've had plenty to talk about, of course, in recent weeks, months. The Donald Trump administration Part 2, the sequel, is rollicking underway, of course, now 1 month in the books and a little bit plus, but certainly has never been a dull moment since the Trumpster took the mantle again. This is a guy that has work ethic like no one has ever seen. I think it's really ironic that the big controversy right now in Washington, of course, is the Doge organization, committee, whatever you want to call it, which basically is just an offshoot from the White House. It's an executive branch appointed group led by Elon Musk that is in charge of figuring out where all of your paycheck, and it's gone to Washington. Somebody finally asked the question, where is all this money going in a country that generates so much revenue and has so much that they pour into Washington? And somebody is finally doing basically a glorified audit of every aspect of government. And that is causing just undisturbed. I was looking for the right word there. Constant sound bites and arguments and different things from both sides. Of course, it's hard to understand how one side, and I've told you since this show began, that the whole idea of it's Republican, Democrat, it's politics, it's cyclical, all the things you hear is all nonsense, because this is not Republican, Democrat. This is not left, right. This is not conservative, liberal, conservative, Marxist, conservative, socialist. This is Washington, D.C., the organism in its whole, in its totality, against the rest of us in America. We are not in Washington, so we really don't register very much on the important scale, other than at election time. That's the only time they're really concerned about you and me and everybody outside the Beltway. And of course, they're really concerned now because in the 2024 election, the American people stepped up and sent a resounding message to the Washington swamp. We know what you're up to now. We're done with this. Game over. It's time to turn the page. We want massive reform. And the definition of massive reform is one Elon Musk, because Elon Musk was the man for the job, just like Donald Trump right now is the man for the job. You heard Trump during the campaign say, well, they're frustrated. They've tried everything to get me, to knock me off, even tried to shoot me a couple times. He says, but I don't need their money. I don't care what they try to do. I'm not doing this for them. I've told you several times on this show that my former boss, a very close personal friend of Donald Trump, in fact, when he was getting sworn in at the inaugural ceremony back on February 20th, you saw my former boss, Phil Ruffin, in the background, standing right up there on the podium, right behind the ceremony. Phil was front and center to watch his friend being sworn in. Phil, of course, owns casinos in Las Vegas, a commercial and retail property all over the country and throughout the Caribbean. Phil told me on a phone call or around the election time in 2016, when Trump got in the first time, Phil said, I told Donald, what the hell? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to be president? You're making billions. You're king of the world. You do whatever you want. You have all your own golf courses. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want. Why do you want this frustration? And basically what Donald Trump told his best friend, and this is why I know it's totally credible. This is not secondhand. He told him directly. He said, Phil, I love this country. It's broken, and I'm the only one who can fix it. And that is truly what his motivation is. No one else would have withstood all of the attempts to take him down legally, to pardon the French again, trump up charges against him for just the most ridiculous things ever. He was charged in a couple different circumstances with crimes that no one ever has been charged with before. They basically made up allegations and turned them into actual charges. And so the whole saga has been ridiculous, but I don't want to focus on that today. I want to kind of stick to the point. Why Elon Musk? Because Trump learned so much that first trip to Washington, D.C. in 2016. He didn't know what he was in for. He didn't realize the ferocity and the organization and the absolute efficient assembly line of corruption that Washington, D.C. was. He counted on some Washington insiders to help him make decisions and appoint the right people to posts. He learned very early on, and he admits it now, that he made a lot of mistakes. He listened to the wrong people. He trusted the wrong people, because it's like the old joke. And I think everybody knew this back in the day. Of course, anybody young listening to this won't even know who the Lone Ranger was, but of course, he was a crusader in a TV series that would ride around the West with a mask on and do good, take down cattle rustlers and other, train robbers and stagecoach robbers. And his loyal companion was a Native American by the name of Tonto. The Lone Ranger and Tonto, there was an old joke. This is what Trump ran into in Washington the last time, that on one of their missions, they're suddenly surrounded by a group of hostile Apaches, and there's no escape. There's no place to go. The Lone Ranger looks over at Tonto and said, well, old friend, it looks like we've had it this time. And Tonto replies, what you mean, we, pale face? That's exactly what happened to Donald Trump last time. There's another analogy that you could use. There's an old adage in golf when you're playing a foursome and it's two guys against two other guys, but the one of the guys is friends, real good friends with the other team, the other two players. There's an old game called Three Friends and a Stranger. When the guy who doesn't know better, his partner is tanking a little bit because he's already in on the bet with his other friends. If they all take down the poor fish that thinks he's playing competitively, then they, in the parking lot, that guy might be going to his car and seeing them splitting up money on the other side of the parking lot. So Three Friends and a Stranger, Tonto and the Lone Ranger. Basically, that's what Elon Musk ran into. And just to illustrate that point some more, if you watch the goings on in Washington, see what happens there with all these congressional hearings. There's always these serious charges. For 4 years, we endured all of the Biden crime family nonsense, all of the information that the committees, there were 3 different ones investigating all of Biden's corruption. The fact that this guy is a multimillionaire now, despite never having a job other than working in government, where the most he's ever made in a year is $175,000 in salary, but all of a sudden he owns 2 mansions in Delaware. The influence peddling by his family, his brothers, and his son Hunter, just clearly outlined in all of these congressional hearings. They had all the evidence of all the bank accounts and where the money was being funneled. They had the evidence of money being paid out to 11 different people in the Biden family, millions of dollars that went to these folks. The Hunter Biden, the drug addict and out of control that he was, took a laptop, of course, in for repairs, never picked it up. That ended up in the hands of the FBI, and also the New York Post was able to get a copy of all that content, and it's damning all of the information on there, talking about all their different partners that Joe Biden continued to deny even knowing any of those people. There are photos of him playing golf with Hunter's partners. There are instances where it's on the logs that Hunter Biden flew on intercontinental trips with the vice president on Air Force Two. One famous trip to China, he came back with a $20 billion commitment from the Bank of China to engage in his investment firm, which he was partners with two other guys that they had no investment experience. All of these mostly adversarial countries to ours, we're just giving all these great deals. Anyway, the point of it is there's always these investigations. There's always all of this uproar, but nothing ever happens. And the reason it doesn't happen is because the Washington organism protects itself, because there's nobody in the swamp there, Republican, Democrat, independent, government lifer, bureaucrats, people that run agencies, bureaus, departments. Everybody has their hand in the till. Everybody is riding the gravy train. You cannot be a crusader there and be a Washington insider, because you're implicating yourself in the same scam that you're trying to take somebody down on. There are 10 scams on your record, and everybody knows everybody else's business there. This started with the FBI has not just been corrupt in our era. The FBI has been corrupt since 1935, when it officially formed under the leadership of paranoid pervert J. Edgar Hoover, who for 37 years ran the FBI and ran it inefficiently, even denying the existence of organized crime for almost 25 years before he finally had to admit it was real, when a ill-fated meeting of all the mob bosses in the country in upstate New York, Appalachia is the name of the town, but all of these big fancy cars and guys in, $2,000 linen suits converging on a guy's estate up in the hills of Appalachia. The local police got a force together and raided that meeting, and like roaches coming out from behind the wall, all of these high-level mobsters, the biggest names from all over the country, were running through the woods trying to get away, forging across streams in their suits, trying to hook back up with their limo drivers and get the hell out of town. But that meeting really finally exposed that there was an organized crime movement. The mafia was real. J. Edgar Hoover, for years, whether he was on the take or just was more interested in other activities, basically turned a blind eye to it. Hoover is famous for, from the very day that he got that appointment in 1935 until his death in 1972, Hoover had basically files on every single prominent person in Washington, or anybody who was in any position that could cause him any heartburn for irregularities in the FBI. He was determined he was going to stay on there, and for 37 years he was the director, despite that bureau being rife with inefficiency. Ironically, the 1950s, there was a movie called The FBI made starring Jimmy Stewart, And the cases that they talk about in that movie, one of them at the end was the presence of communists in the country, the horror. Little did we know that just 60 years later, we basically have a Marxist communist movement trying to take over our government with this kind of globalist approach. But the FBI was concerned with a lot of that kind of thing and not so much crime and law and order, which was the reason they were formed to begin with. And it's been a sad situation of continuation, especially in the last three terms of directors that have followed in Mr. Hoover's footsteps. The Mueller, Comey, Christopher Wray triumvirate, disastrous in terms of their mismanagement and terrible leadership and politicization of the premier law enforcement agency in the country, which, by the way, is going to be undergoing a complete enema because Kash Patel now has been approved as the new FBI director. And I don't know if anyone's heard, but overnight, very, very successful former Secret Service agent and broadcaster for the Cumulus Network, basically in the Rush Limbaugh time slot, going up against Clay Travis and his partner, Dan Bongino, agreed, despite having the greatest job in America right now, to go back into government service. He will be the assistant director at the FBI with Kash Patel. And I can just tell you, get ready. They're going to clean house there because the FBI has become a weaponized political organization. I think I've mentioned on the show before, one of the saddest things we've seen in recent years is Christopher Wray going to Congress, the Senate, and the House on multiple occasions. When I say multiple, at least 8 or 10 times in the calendar year of 2023 and 2024, and testifying that Americans need to be diligent. Americans need to be on guard because so many people have come into this country that have terrorist ties from all of these countries. He was sitting there warning Congress and sending the word out to you and me that we had all these nefarious people, and it was not a matter of if, it was a question of when. There's going to be a major domestic terrorist attack in our country that puts all of us in danger. And you might say, well, that's a pretty credible thing for him to be doing. Well, it's not credible at all when you consider he's the FBI director in the administration that allowed all of these people to come into the country unchecked. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they're up to. And he's sounding the alarm. And worse than that, this is the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, the ultimate law enforcement agency in this country, the federal government's police force. And instead of dispatching all of his resources and being out there rounding up all of these nefarious characters that are in the country, he goes to Congress and is warning the American people to be careful. My goodness, it's the most insulting thing I think I've ever seen in government. And I've been following government since basically I could walk and talk. And that was absolutely shameful. Repeat after repeat performance of going up there and being like Chicken Little saying the sky is falling when he is the guy controlling the agency that is supposed to keep all of that from happening, is supposed to have their first priority for keeping us safe. It's just been a shameful run for the FBI. They've been more concerned with raiding school board meetings, taking away irate parents who are fed up with their children being taught all of this garbage about sexuality and gender and how America is a terrible country, that history for the American country should not start in 1776. It should go back to the early 1600s when slaves were brought to this country. And it is an abhorrent situation for sure. But a lot of people died changing that in the Civil War. And the fact that the FBI is more concerned with situations of people questioning the all-powerful Department of Education and the teachers unions and all the people really pulling the strings right now in our government. The fact that the FBI has become their goon force is absolutely shameful, and you are going to see a complete turnaround in that situation because Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are going to make the FBI maybe for the first time ever. I told you, going back to Hoover, the FBI has not been an effective law enforcement, and there's been so many people, very credible field agents and people that dedicated their lives to doing a good job there. But the way it has evolved, and the way it even started with the corrupt director they had for 37 years, this agency's never been what it could be and what it should be, which is the ultimate protector of our American way of life and everything we hold dear. So it was essential to bring Elon Musk in because this is a group. The organism of Washington is not capable of policing itself because everybody's in on the gig, and nothing was ever going to happen. We've watched it through the last 5 or 6, 7, maybe even more presidential administrations. It's always the same. It's always status quo. It's shameful waste of money. Yes, Congress appropriates the money, but then they don't pay any attention to where it goes. It goes to all these different agencies. It goes to all these different places. And if you were paying attention, the last couple of weeks of the Biden administration, it was payday because all this money from the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Infrastructure Bill, $2 trillion pieces of legislation that the Congress passed during the Biden administration, which is laughable because Biden didn't administer anything except for which flavor ice cream he got to have or what time his naps were. And maybe he didn't even plan those. Jill might have been in charge. Excuse me. Dr. Jill might have been in charge of that aspect, but the Biden administration was just a scam. He was a front man, a puppet, behind the scenes people predominantly, and also on the scene, all Obama administration personnel surrounding him. They ran the show. He was a figurehead. And the bottom line is they emptied the piggy bank. Those $1 trillion deals, all the money that was still in the agencies that it was assessed to, particularly the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, unloaded in the last 7 days of the Biden administration. Get ready for this. $20 billion with a B, $20 billion paid out to only like 8 entities. So you do the math. That's at least a couple of billion for each and more. 2.5 billion in that neighborhood. One of the recipients of that $20 billion, getting approximately $2 billion, was an organization called Climate Watch. Climate Watch was formed in Atlanta by failed gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, who ran twice for governor of Georgia in 2020 when she was defeated by Brian Kemp. She refused to concede, so I guess she's still holding out that something's going to change. Of course, in 2024, Kemp beat her by a much wider margin, but Stacey Abrams started a Climate Watch organization. Now, Stacey Abrams has no background in any kind of science or meteorology, has not been involved. She was a kind of a sketchy romance novelist in her civilian life, writing some pretty racy books that are kind of embarrassing if you read excerpts from them. But Stacey Abrams, because she was such a loyal soldier to this leftist movement, the Obama and the Biden administration, she starts Climate Watch with some other investors. The original bank account, and it's all documented, this isn't speculative, the original bank account for Climate Watch was $100. That's how much they put in to start Climate Watch. And do you know that back on about between January 13th and January 20th, Inauguration Day, the Climate Watch organization was sent a check from the federal government from the Inflation Reduction Act, which just its name has got to be the most absurd name for any legislation ever, because $1 trillion bill on the American taxpayers in a country that already has a $36 trillion deficit is anything but an inflation reducer. But Stacey Abrams and Climate Watch added to their $100 in the bank with a $2 billion check from the Environmental Protection Agency. And 7 other entities also got more than $2 billion checks for their agencies that are just not any kind of active situation. They're like lobbying groups that want to go to these international conventions, the Paris Climate Accords, these third world countries having these symposiums and seminars. And the goal for that is not anything having to do with the climate. They blame the industrialized world in much of Africa because that's what they say has affected their climate and ability to grow crops. And it'll be all good if all the other civilized countries in the world, especially America, steps up and just, send us 100, 200 billion, whatever. We'll be all good. It's all a cash grab. Everything's a cash grab. The most effective cliche in the history of mankind. Follow the money. It will lead you to every mystery in the world. It will explain every phenomenon. If you follow the money, you can always figure out what's going on. So Elon Musk was brought in. He's a wrecking ball. He's the richest man in the world. He's one of the most successful business people that this planet has ever produced. He's above reproach in terms of, somebody influencing his decision making. He is a naturalized citizen. So I heard some idiot a few weeks ago say, well, he's got his eye on the White House. Well, he might have his eye on the White House, but he can't occupy it because he was not born in this country. And unless there's major constitutional changes, that's not going to fly. So Musk befriended Donald Trump, understands exactly where we were as a country and where we were trying to go. This Marxist movement, if they would have gotten another term, it might have been the game over. But the American people were smart enough to step up and send a mandate to Washington we're not going to stand for this. So Musk is a wrecking ball. Trump wants him to be even more aggressive. Go after this kind of fraud. I've got a new name for it. I'm calling it WAFT. WAFT. It's because you always hear them talking about waste, abuse, and fraud. I've added the T. The T is for theft. So WAFT has to end. WAFT, it got to end. And Elon Musk right now is finding all kinds of nooks and crannies with all of these swamp creatures who are all being are actually pocketing tons of money. And now you've got the corrupt press crying all the time, what about these poor people that have given their lives to public service working in the federal government? They're taking their jobs away. These are people that haven't gone to work since the COVID year in 2020. A lot of them have second jobs. They still get their government checks. They don't do anything. They are just riding the gravy train like everybody else in Washington. I told you last week, drive around Northern Virginia and Washington. The gated communities get just more spectacular one after another. People that just have regular jobs in these agencies and bureaus and department are living in $5-6 million houses in these opulent communities. It is absolutely unbelievable to go just spend a little time up there and look around at what's happening. It's got to stop. It's my money. It's your money. And they are using it as their own little slush fund because Congress appropriates the money, sends it out, and then it's apportioned to all the people that are in line with their hands out looking for favors, who have started organizations specifically because they've been loyal soldiers and big contributors to these campaigns. It's a vicious circle. It's money going in everybody's pocket that's involved, and it's got to stop. This is why the founders did not want to have a massive behemoth federal government, because when you've got a situation like this, we have a fourth branch of government in Washington besides executive and legislative and judicial. We have the administrative state, and it is 100% leftist Democrat controlled. Their elections come and go. The White House changes hands. Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. But one thing that they've got in place that they've built meticulously is the administrative state, which is 100% Democrat. And they write most of the rules and regulations. They enforce all of the policies of these coming and going governments. They are the mainstay, and now we're hearing, they're laying off tens of thousands of these poor people who have not done a damn thing except collect money from the government, from you and me, for the last 4 years. How often do we hear Boeing is laying off 15,000 employees because of disappointing sales and performance? Starbucks is closing 10,000 locations, which is going to cost people 14,000 jobs. The Ford plant in, Bumble Blank, Montana is shutting down after 50 years, and 17,000 people are going to be out of a job. In the private sector, this is standard procedure. When things are not going well financially, you close them down. You don't continue to operate a loser. In government, even though we're got a $36 trillion deficit, we just print some more money and roll right along because everybody's still getting paid. And that includes the congressman. That includes all the people at the administrative state. That includes all of the people contributing to these situations, because then their payback for supporting these people is they get these massive grants from the government, like Stacey Abrams and Climate Watch, whose bank account went from $100 to $2,100,000,000 in the blink of an eye. They don't do anything. They just want to spend it to go stay in 5-star hotels, eat caviar, drink champagne at these conferences with all of these other phony balonies crying about the climate and crying about this is the greatest existential threat to humanity. It's all contrived. It's all BS. Don't buy any of it. And please don't listen to the news media, because they are as complicit as the people that are causing the issues, because their networks are benefiting too with giant grants of money for various things. It's a vicious circle. It's something you have to know about, because to stop it, you need to get involved in the political process. Call your congressman, call your senators, tell them to shut down the gravy train. You might get some resistance because they're on the train too, but it's got to stop. We've got to get to a point where we got some term limits for Congress and these lifetime appointments for these sacred cow government employees who should be treated just like any private sector employee like me and you. If we don't do our job, if we're not good at what we're doing, if our company's not making money, you don't continue. These people think they have this lifetime deal, and they've got unions and all kinds of contracts and all kinds of technicalities that keep them employed when they're doing not a damn thing. So it's time for Americans to not just vote. Thank God. And I applaud so many of you for recognizing, hopefully listening to programs like this and being exposed to what's going on in our nation's capital. It's a cesspool. It is a massive cleanup, and serious men like Donald J. Trump and Elon Musk, untouchables, I guess you could say, back from the battling the gangs. We talked about that before, where the federal government, actually the Treasury Department, was sending out agents to try to close down Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, and others. Now the new untouchables are Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his merry band of every single nominee he has put to Congress has been approved. It's going to be a dream team. We're going to see so much changes. Don't listen to the noise. Don't listen to the Democrats that are being dragged off the gravy train and kicking and screaming all the way. And for sure, don't listen to the media, who is right in the middle of it all and benefits as well as all the other gravy sucking pigs up there. It's time to close down the show, this show and the show in Washington. We appreciate you tuning in every week. Kip Keefer, thanks for listening to Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.